The woman lived in a quiet neighborhood where every house had its own small garden, and children played on the sidewalks after school. She was soft-spoken and always polite, someone who preferred to stay in the background rather than draw attention to herself. Her days were simple, full of little routines that brought her comfort. She loved tending to her garden, arranging flowers and trimming hedges. There was a satisfaction in watching plants grow, a quiet joy that kept her mind at ease. Most mornings she would sip tea on her porch, feeling the sun on her face and listening to the birds sing. Sometimes she would wave to neighbors passing by, but she did not have many close friends in the area. She liked the peace of being alone, yet she also cared deeply about the people around her. Small gestures like helping carry groceries or giving a neighbor a hand with painting were things she did naturally. Her gentle nature made people feel comfortable around her, even if she wasn't outgoing. Her home was neat and well kept, reflecting the care she put into everything. Inside there were simple decorations, books neatly arranged on shelves, and a quiet atmosphere that mirrored her personality. She enjoyed reading about history and stories of people who faced challenges and overcame them. There was something inspiring about ordinary people showing courage, and she often thought about what it meant to be truly strong. The neighborhood was managed by an HOA, which meant there were rules for almost everything. The color of paint on houses, the types of plants in gardens, and even the way mailboxes looked were all under scrutiny. Some residents liked having rules because it kept the area clean and organized. Others found it frustrating, especially when the rules were enforced strictly or unfairly. There was a woman in the HOA who was known for being strict and loud. She enjoyed pointing out mistakes and often made residents feel uneasy. People whispered about her in hushed tones, calling her a bully, but no one wanted to confront her directly. She seemed to take pleasure in asserting control, and many neighbors avoided her whenever possible. Despite her quiet nature, the soft-spoken woman had always felt a sense of fairness and justice. She believed in treating people with kindness but also felt a need to stand up when something was wrong. Still, she kept this part of herself private, preferring to handle situations calmly and without drama. Many neighbors assumed she was too gentle to challenge the HOA bully. Life went on normally for her, with small moments of joy and occasional small worries. She would notice the HOA bully's presence during meetings but tried to ignore the harsh words and rules being imposed. Her approach was to listen carefully, nod politely, and respond calmly. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when the bully's words stung, but she reminded herself that anger or confrontation would not solve anything. Neighbors sometimes asked for her opinion on minor disputes, and she would offer thoughtful advice. She had a way of looking at situations clearly, without letting emotions cloud her judgment. People began to notice that even though she was quiet, there was a steady strength in her demeanor. She didn't need to speak loudly to be respected, and those who paid attention could see that she had an inner confidence that was rare. Evenings were her favorite time of day. She would sit by her window, watching the sky change colors as the sun set. Sometimes children would wave to her from their yards, and she would wave back with a warm smile. The neighborhood felt safe and familiar, a place where she could breathe and relax. Her life was ordinary on the surface, but there was a sense that she carried more within her than most people could see. She sometimes thought about the past, recalling lessons she had learned and challenges she had overcome. There were times in her life when she had faced difficulties that required courage and discipline. These experiences had shaped her into the person she was, someone who could remain calm under pressure and think clearly in tense situations. Even though she rarely mentioned it, she had trained herself in self-defense and had learned skills that would surprise anyone who underestimated her. For now, however, her life was peaceful. She enjoyed baking, taking walks, and tending to her small collection of potted plants. Neighbors would occasionally stop to chat, asking about flowers or sharing stories about their day. She listened attentively, offering kind words and gentle encouragement. People liked talking to her because she made them feel heard and valued. Yet beneath the calm exterior, there was an awareness that life was not always predictable. She knew that the HOA bully could create problems at any moment. She had seen how the bully treated others, how easily she escalated minor issues into conflicts. The woman reminded herself to stay prepared, to remain composed, and to face challenges with quiet confidence when the time came. Despite the potential for conflict, the soft-spoken woman maintained her optimism. She believed that people could change, that kindness could make a difference, and that standing up for oneself did not always require aggression. Her approach was subtle, steady, and rooted in patience. She hoped that by showing respect and understanding, she could influence others positively. As the day ended and the neighborhood settled into quiet, she felt a sense of contentment. Her life might seem simple to outsiders, but it was rich in its own way. There was strength in her calmness, and wisdom in her careful observation of the world around her. Little did anyone know, beneath her gentle voice and soft demeanor was a woman capable of remarkable courage, someone who could face challenges head-on when necessary. In that quiet neighborhood, life continued its rhythm. Children laughed, neighbors greeted each other, and the HOA carried out its rules. The soft-spoken woman remained a part of it all, living her life with grace, kindness, and a quiet strength that few could see. She was unassuming, yet ready for whatever life might bring, even if the challenges had not yet revealed themselves. Her story was just beginning, and the peaceful days were about to shift in ways no one could have predicted. Days passed in the neighborhood as usual, with quiet mornings and evenings filled with soft light. The soft-spoken woman continued her routines, tending her garden, watering plants, and enjoying tea on her porch. She waved to neighbors, exchanged smiles, and tried to focus on simple pleasures. Life felt calm, but beneath the surface, a storm was quietly forming. The HOA bully had begun noticing her. It started with small things, a comment about the height of her plants, a note about the way her mailbox looked. At first, she ignored it, believing the matters were trivial. She had always valued peace and thought it better to avoid unnecessary conflict. But the bully's actions began to escalate. Notices arrived more frequently, each one carrying sharper words, criticizing details that seemed almost meaningless. It was as if every choice she made was being watched, judged, and criticized. During the monthly HOA meeting, the tension became clearer. The woman sat quietly among the residents, listening as the bully made loud declarations about rule violations. Her voice carried authority, and some neighbors looked uncomfortable as the bully singled out minor infractions. When her name was mentioned, the woman felt a small flutter of unease but remained calm, nodding politely and responding with soft, measured words. She knew that arguing loudly would only worsen the situation. The bully seemed determined to push her boundaries. She made a point of showing up at her yard during the day, inspecting plants and commenting loudly about things that were perfectly acceptable. Neighbors noticed and whispers began circulating. They admired the woman's calm demeanor but wondered if she would finally respond. Many felt sympathy for her, knowing that dealing with someone so aggressive and manipulative could be exhausting. At home, she reflected on the situation quietly. She considered talking to the HOA board, but she also worried about creating unnecessary drama. She valued kindness and preferred to resolve issues without confrontation. Still, she could not ignore the growing tension. The bully's actions were not just about rules, they were meant to intimidate, to make her feel small and powerless. That was something she could not allow herself to feel for long. Her neighbors began to notice her subtle resilience. While she did not lash out or shout, there was a quiet firmness in the way she responded. She listened carefully to the bully's accusations, answered politely, and never lost her composure. The soft-spoken woman had learned over the years that strength was often quiet, and courage was measured in patience as much as in action. People began to respect her more, though many still underestimated her abilities. The bully escalated further by targeting communal spaces. She criticized shared gardens, complaining about flowers that were perfectly healthy. She claimed rules were being broken in ways that seemed trivial to everyone else. Meetings grew longer and more stressful, with the bully dominating conversations and attempting to humiliate anyone who disagreed. Residents felt the pressure, and the atmosphere of the neighborhood began to shift. Despite the tension, the woman continued her daily routines. She maintained her garden meticulously, cleaned her home, and offered friendly words to passing neighbors. She refused to let the bully's behavior disrupt her peace. In her heart, she knew that reacting out of anger would only feed the bully's power. Instead, she focused on observation, learning patterns, and understanding how to protect herself if needed. There were moments when frustration built up. A notice about an alleged rule violation arrived unexpectedly, criticizing the height of her garden hedges. She read it quietly, feeling a flash of irritation, but rather than respond with anger, she took a deep breath and made a plan to handle it calmly. She reminded herself that the bully thrived on creating fear and conflict, and the best defense was steady composure. Neighbors began to watch the unfolding situation with curiosity and concern. Some admired her restraint and kindness, while others worried about how much she could endure. They noticed that, even under pressure, she never lost her manners or her sense of fairness. She spoke softly but firmly, setting boundaries without aggression. The contrast between her calm demeanor and the bully's loud, domineering behavior became more apparent. One afternoon, the woman walked through the neighborhood park, noticing children playing and families enjoying the day. She felt a pang of longing for simplicity and peace. The bully's actions had made even ordinary moments feel tense. Still, she refused to let fear dominate her life. She focused on the small joys, the laughter of children, the beauty of flowers, and the warmth of sunlight. These things reminded her why she valued calmness and kindness above all. At an HOA board meeting, the bully openly confronted her again, pointing out supposed infractions and questioning her actions in front of everyone. The room fell silent, with residents unsure of how she would respond. She listened carefully, her expression calm, then spoke in a measured, gentle tone. She answered the concerns without defensiveness, explaining her perspective clearly and politely. The confidence in her voice surprised the bully, who had expected fear or flustered reactions. Over time, the woman's composure began to shift the dynamic slightly. Some neighbors whispered to each other, noting that she was not the person the bully expected. Her patience, understanding, and quiet confidence were starting to create cracks in the bully's intimidation. Still, the tension remained, and the soft-spoken woman knew that the situation could escalate further. She prepared herself mentally, reflecting on her past experiences, the discipline she had learned, and the inner strength she had developed. Even at home, she practiced mindfulness, reminding herself to stay calm and focused. She would spend time in her garden, arrange flowers thoughtfully, and enjoy quiet moments of reflection. Each day she strengthened her resolve, knowing that patience was her greatest weapon. The bully's provocations had become a test, one that required more than quick reactions. It required strategy, observation, and courage. As the days turned into weeks, the soft-spoken woman maintained her calm and consistent approach. The bully's attempts to unsettle her had little effect, though they continued. Residents began to notice her ability to handle pressure without aggression. They admired her for not giving in to fear or anger, even as they themselves felt frustrated by the bully's behavior. The woman's quiet dignity became a subtle beacon of strength, showing that courage did not always need to be loud or visible. At the end of each day, she would sit on her porch watching the sun dip below the horizon and take comfort in the stillness. She understood that challenges were part of life and that strength came from within. She was ready to face the bully when the time came, even if the confrontation had not yet fully arrived. Her patience, kindness, and quiet resilience were preparing her for something the neighborhood could never have anticipated. Life continued, full of small moments, whispered conversations, and growing tension. The soft-spoken woman remained calm, observant, and quietly strong. The bully's presence was a constant challenge, but it also highlighted the depth of her character. She was gentle yet resilient, soft-spoken yet firm, and beneath the surface she carried a strength that had yet to be revealed, a power that would eventually change the balance of the neighborhood entirely. The tension in the neighborhood had been building for weeks. The soft-spoken woman continued her routines, keeping her calm and observing the situation carefully. The HOA bully, frustrated by the lack of reaction, began trying more direct forms of intimidation. She would stand near the woman's garden while criticizing minor things in a loud voice, trying to provoke a reaction. Most residents avoided confrontation, but the woman faced the bully with quiet attention and polite words, neither backing down nor escalating the situation. One afternoon, as she was watering her plants, the bully walked up and started ranting about the state of her garden. She gestured wildly, her words sharp and accusatory. Neighbors watched from a distance, expecting the soft-spoken woman to shrink or apologize, but she remained still. Her hands held the hose, her posture calm, and her voice soft but steady. "I have followed the rules carefully," she said, "and I have made sure everything is in order." The words were simple, but there was an underlying firmness that the bully had not anticipated. The bully scoffed and stepped closer, pointing at a flower bed. You think you can ignore the rules? You think this is acceptable? She shouted. There was a moment when the woman felt a surge of adrenaline, not fear, but a sudden awareness of her own strength. For a brief instant, memories of her past training flashed through her mind. The discipline, the movements, the quiet confidence she had learned through years of self-defense. Without thinking about it, her body moved with a controlled precision, a presence that radiated calm authority. She didn't raise her voice or strike. She simply stood firm, her stance balanced and steady. The bully, unprepared for such controlled confidence, hesitated. There was something in the woman's posture, her calm focus, that made the aggressor pause. Neighbors who had been watching sensed the shift in energy, the sudden realization that the soft-spoken woman was not weak. "Please step back," she said calmly, her voice even. "There is no need for confrontation. We can discuss this calmly." The words carried weight because of the presence behind them. It was not anger that made them powerful. It was discipline and confidence. The bully, unused to anyone standing calmly in the face of her aggression, felt a moment of uncertainty. The moment passed, and the bully muttered something under her breath before walking away. The woman lowered the hose, feeling the strength of her body and mind in a way she had rarely experienced. She realized that her years of training, though often forgotten in daily life, had prepared her for situations exactly like this. The calmness she had relied on for patience now carried a power she hadn't fully acknowledged until now. Word spread quickly among the neighbors. Some noticed the confrontation, and whispers of astonishment filled the streets. People had always seen her as gentle and reserved, but now they began to glimpse the depth beneath her quiet demeanor. She had never sought recognition or attention, but her actions spoke volumes. She had demonstrated that courage and skill did not need to be loud or aggressive. Sometimes they were silent, steady and unyielding. In the following days, the bully seemed more cautious. She still tried to assert herself, but the confidence of the woman had changed the dynamic. The bully no longer approached her with the same boldness. Even small interactions carried a hint of hesitation, as if the aggressor sensed that her tactics might not succeed. The neighborhood began to notice this subtle shift, and the soft-spoken woman's presence earned more respect. The woman herself was reflective about what had happened. She recognized that her skills, long dormant in her mind, had a practical use in protecting herself and maintaining her dignity. She didn't relish confrontation, but she understood that standing firm, calmly, and deliberately could prevent further harassment. Her approach was rooted in observation and discipline rather than aggression, a testament to her careful nature and the years of self-training she had invested in. Even as she carried on with her daily life, the knowledge of her own strength added a quiet confidence. She could walk through the neighborhood with her head held high, aware that she could handle difficult situations without losing composure. It was empowering in a subtle internal way, a confidence that required no loud words or dramatic gestures. She felt prepared, balanced, and in control. The bully tried once more during a board meeting. She made accusations in front of residents, trying to challenge the soft-spoken woman publicly. But the woman's calm presence and steady voice disarmed the situation. She responded politely but firmly, explaining the details clearly and logically. Her quiet confidence prevented escalation, leaving the bully flustered and unable to continue her usual tactics. The meeting ended with the bully noticeably subdued, while the woman's reputation for strength, both inner and outward, grew quietly among those present. Neighbors began seeking her advice more often, noticing her ability to remain composed under pressure. They appreciated her calm, thoughtful guidance and admired how she could maintain respect, even when faced with aggression. The woman shared insights and strategies for dealing with difficult people, always emphasizing patience, observation, and measured responses. She encouraged others to understand that true strength often came from self-control, not force. At home, she reflected on the events with quiet satisfaction. She arranged flowers, wrote notes, and enjoyed peaceful walks. She understood that life would always bring challenges, but she also recognized that she was no longer intimidated by confrontations. Her skill? Evenings were filled with contemplation. She watched the neighborhood from her porch, noting the subtle changes in interactions between residents. The bully's presence remained, but it was no longer overwhelming. The woman felt a sense of quiet victory, not one of anger or triumph over another, but of self-realization. She had discovered the depth of her own abilities and the effectiveness of calm, disciplined strength. The neighborhood continued to move forward, the bully now less aggressive and more cautious. The soft-spoken woman's calm authority had shifted the balance subtly but meaningfully. Residents began to understand that appearances could be deceiving, and that someone quiet and gentle could carry remarkable strength within them. As days passed, the soft-spoken woman returned to her routines, tending her garden, enjoying simple pleasures, and interacting with neighbors. The knowledge of her own inner strength brought a new layer of confidence and resilience. She had faced confrontation and discovered that her quiet demeanor could be a powerful tool, not just for self-defense, but for earning respect and navigating difficult situations. The hidden depth within her had emerged, and it was only the beginning of a larger journey. The neighborhood had started to notice a subtle change. The soft-spoken woman, once seen only as quiet and polite, now carried a presence that drew attention without effort. People began to sense her confidence even though she spoke softly and acted with humility. The HOA bully, once so dominant and intimidating, had become cautious, avoiding direct confrontations whenever possible. The balance of power in the community was slowly shifting. One afternoon, the woman decided to attend a neighborhood gathering. It was a casual meeting to discuss landscaping and shared spaces, but she knew the bully might use it as an opportunity to assert herself. She arrived calmly, smiling at neighbors and exchanging polite greetings. Her demeanor was natural, friendly, and composed. As the meeting began, the bully tried to dominate the conversation, pointing out minor issues and criticizing residents who had small disagreements. The woman listened attentively, her posture calm, her eyes steady. When the bully addressed her directly, she responded with clarity and kindness. She explained her perspective without argument, presenting facts calmly and confidently. The words were simple, but they carried authority. Neighbors noticed the shift. The woman was no longer just reacting to the bully, she was guiding the conversation and maintaining a respectful, firm stance. The bully's usual tactics failed, and she realized that her power over others had diminished. Over the following days, more incidents occurred where the woman's quiet confidence made a difference. In one instance, the bully tried to criticize a neighbor's garden design, loudly pointing out imagined violations. The woman stepped in, speaking gently but firmly, asking for facts and clarifications. Her calm demeanor and logical approach prevented escalation. The bully was left without leverage, and the neighbors quietly admired the woman's skill in handling difficult situations. The soft-spoken woman's approach was always rooted in observation and patience. She never reacted with anger or aggression, and she never sought to humiliate anyone. Instead, she relied on understanding, empathy, and her own sense of inner strength. Her presence alone was enough to prevent conflicts from growing. People began to realize that she had an influence that didn't require loud words or intimidation. It was a steady, quiet strength that inspired respect. Neighbors began to approach her for advice. They asked how to deal with conflicts, how to maintain composure under pressure, and how to handle difficult personalities. She shared her thoughts with humility, emphasizing the importance of patience, careful observation, and standing firm in a polite but confident manner. Her insights were practical and relatable, and residents started to feel more empowered themselves. The community slowly began to shift, with more people willing to assert themselves respectfully, encouraged by the woman's example. The HOA bully noticed the change as well. Her previous dominance over residents was weakening. She attempted to regain control by pointing out minor issues, but the soft-spoken woman's presence and careful words deflected the aggression. The bully became more cautious, less confident, and occasionally flustered. It was clear that the woman had become a quiet force in the neighborhood, one that could not be easily intimidated. One day, a particularly tense situation arose. The bully had identified what she thought was a major violation in the community garden, gathering residents for a confrontation. The woman arrived calmly, observing the scene and listening carefully to the accusations. When it was her turn to speak, she addressed the points logically and respectfully, highlighting facts and explaining procedures. Her calm voice and measured words changed the energy of the room. Tension faded and the bully's usual aggression lost its impact. Residents felt relief, recognizing the woman's ability to handle high-pressure situations gracefully. Through these experiences, the soft-spoken woman realized the impact of her own growth. Her confidence was not about power over others, but about understanding herself and maintaining integrity. She had learned that true influence comes from calmness, clarity, and the ability to stand firm without hostility. Her actions inspired others to approach conflicts differently, with patience and respect rather than fear or anger. The neighborhood began to see changes beyond the interactions with the bully. Residents who had been hesitant to speak up now felt empowered to express their opinions respectfully. Meetings became more collaborative and less dominated by fear. People looked to the soft-spoken woman not as a leader who demanded authority, but as someone whose calm wisdom guided the community naturally. Her influence was quiet but undeniable, a presence that reminded everyone of the power of steady strength. Even at home, she noticed a change in how she approached daily life. Small challenges no longer caused stress or frustration. She continued her routines with a sense of purpose and confidence, understanding that she was capable of handling whatever came her way. The garden, the quiet walks, the interactions with neighbors, all of these became opportunities to practice patience and composure. She embraced life with a sense of quiet joy, appreciating both the peaceful moments and the challenges that tested her strength. As the HOA bully's influence waned, the neighborhood became a more harmonious place. Residents respected one another more and approached conflicts with calm discussion rather than fear. The soft-spoken woman remained modest about her role in this change, never boasting or seeking recognition. She continued to live simply, focusing on her garden, her home, and her relationships with neighbors. Yet her presence had altered the community in a profound way. The woman reflected on her journey with quiet satisfaction. She had discovered that strength could be soft-spoken, that courage could be gentle, and that influence did not require aggression. Her skills, discipline, and inner resilience had become tools not for confrontation, but for creating balance and harmony. She had faced intimidation without compromising her values and had inspired others to do the same. As the sun set each evening, she would sit on her porch and watch the neighborhood. Children played safely, neighbors exchanged friendly words, and the community felt more united. The bully's once dominant presence had softened, and the woman's quiet authority had helped restore a sense of respect and fairness. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, but she felt confident in her ability to navigate them with grace and strength. In this phase of her life, the soft-spoken woman had grown into a figure of quiet leadership. Her calm confidence, clear thinking, and disciplined nature had changed the dynamics of the neighborhood without aggression or force. People looked to her for guidance, inspired by her example, and the community felt safer and more harmonious. The journey was ongoing, but she had learned that the greatest strength often lay in composure, patience, and the quiet assertion of one's values. The neighborhood had begun to settle into a new rhythm. The HOA bully, once loud and overbearing, was now cautious and subdued. Her attempts to dominate discussions or intimidate residents had lost their effect. People who had once felt nervous or uncertain around her were now more confident, speaking up with polite firmness and following the rules without fear. The soft-spoken woman had quietly changed the dynamics not by confrontation, but through steady presence and calm authority. Life returned to its simple routines. The soft-spoken woman tended her garden, enjoying the colors and fragrances of the flowers she nurtured. She took quiet walks, greeted neighbors with genuine warmth, and continued to be attentive to the little things that made life pleasant. Her days were filled with gentle rhythms, moments of reflection, and the satisfaction of knowing she had made a difference without seeking recognition. Neighbors began to approach her more openly. They shared stories of small improvements in the neighborhood, thanked her for her guidance, and sought her advice on handling difficult situations. She listened with patience, offering gentle suggestions, always emphasizing fairness, calmness, and integrity. Her experience had taught her that true strength was about supporting others, maintaining composure, and encouraging respect rather than instilling fear. The HOA bully, though still present, had become a minor figure in the community. Her previous attempts to control or manipulate were no longer effective. She spoke less, carefully considered her words, and no longer sought to provoke conflict. The shift was subtle, but it reflected the power of quiet courage and disciplined strength. The neighborhood had learned that appearances could be deceiving. and that someone who seemed gentle and unassuming could carry remarkable influence through composure and resilience. The soft-spoken woman reflected on her journey. She remembered the early days when the bully's words had stung and created tension. She remembered the moments of frustration when her patience was tested, and she remembered the moment when her inner strength emerged naturally, surprising even herself. Each step had reinforced her understanding that courage was not always loud, and that standing firm with calm confidence could change situations more effectively than aggression. She realized that her own growth had impacted more than just the bully. Residents were now more willing to communicate openly, resolve conflicts respectfully, and support one another. Meetings that had once been tense and stressful were now more cooperative and productive. People began to take initiative, guided by the example of patience and quiet strength that she had demonstrated. Her influence had created a ripple effect, improving the overall atmosphere of the community. Even in small moments, her impact was evident. A neighbor who had previously avoided conflict now spoke up politely when rules were misunderstood. Children noticed the calm presence of adults who handled disagreements respectfully. The community felt safer, more harmonious, and more connected. The soft-spoken woman's quiet courage had inspired confidence in others, not by force but by example. She also reflected on her own life. The experience had deepened her self-awareness and self-respect. She had learned to trust her instincts, rely on her skills, and maintain her integrity in challenging situations. She had discovered that strength could coexist with gentleness and that humility did not mean weakness. Her calm presence was now a source of reassurance, both for herself and for those around her. Evenings in the neighborhood were peaceful. She would sit on her porch, watching the sun sink behind the trees and listening to the soft sounds of life. The laughter of children, the distant voices of neighbors, and the gentle rustle of leaves were reminders of the calm and harmony she had helped cultivate. The bully's previous dominance felt like a distant memory, replaced by a sense of balance and respect. Residents occasionally shared their gratitude, though she never sought it. They expressed admiration for her patience, clarity, and gentle authority. She accepted their words with quiet appreciation, knowing that the real reward was the positive change she had fostered. Her life had been enriched not by recognition, but by the knowledge that she had influenced her community in meaningful ways. The woman understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but she felt equipped to handle them. Her experience had taught her resilience, the power of calm observation, and the effectiveness of measured responses. She knew that patience, empathy, and inner strength could overcome fear and intimidation. The lessons she had learned were now ingrained, guiding her through daily life and shaping her interactions with others. In the end, the soft-spoken woman returned to her routines with a sense of fulfillment. She tended her garden, shared kind words with neighbors, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of life. Her story had reached a resolution, but it was also a beginning. She had discovered the depth of her own strength, the value of calm leadership, and the impact of quiet courage. The neighborhood, too, had transformed, becoming a place where respect, fairness, and thoughtful communication prevailed. As she watched the sunset, she reflected on the journey with a sense of quiet joy. The bully's influence had faded, harmony had been restored, and the community had grown stronger and more connected. The soft-spoken woman had learned that the greatest victories were often subtle, achieved not with noise or aggression, but with patience, discipline, and steadfast integrity. Her life returned to its gentle rhythm, enriched by the knowledge that true strength is often hidden, and that courage can shine brightest in quiet, unassuming ways.